Watchers call. Whispers from the eternal void.
The boarding lamps carved through vacuum like surgical blades, and in their merciless glare I witnessed something that violated every law I understood about death and discipline. 27 headless Cadian bodies stood at perfect attention in the frost-rimed corridor of the Bastion Hulk Last Stand, their boots mag-locked to hexagonal deck plates that gleamed with crystalline ice. No heads, no necks, just ragged stumps of spine and windpipe. Yet every corpse maintained parade rest with shoulders squared, arms aligned at regulation angles, fingers curled precisely along trouser seams. The impossible sight burned into my retinas as our lumens swept across them, headless guardsmen holding formation in hard vacuum without nervous systems, to coordinate posture without tendons to maintain stance, without any earthly reason to remain upright. I am Corporal Merrick Voss, Vox operator attached to Inquisitorial Retrieval Team Moors 13, and I have walked through horrors that would shatter lesser minds, like ceramite under artillery. But this violated something deeper than fear. It broke the fundamental rules of flesh and bone, of death and duty. The dead do not stand at attention. The dead do not dress ranks. Yet when my throat found the old regimental number without conscious thought, when Kasser Tor's 8th sound off, rasped through my vox like a prayer torn from childhood, every headless corpse pivoted left in perfect unison. The movement was beautiful and obscene. A ripple passed along 30 meters of corridor, 2 files executing dress right with parade ground precision despite the absence of eyes to guide them, ears to hear commands, or brains to process orders. Boots scraped against deck plates in synchronized harmony that echoed through airless space like a death rattle made music. Behind me, a Khazarkan's servos strained as her hand clamped involuntarily. The Sister of Battle's rosary clicked to sudden silence. The last stand drifted in Cadia's shattered orbital graveyard, near the Eye of Terror, a fragment of Kasser Fortress City that had survived planetary annihilation through means beyond my comprehension. Our mission parameters remained classified beyond my clearance, but the chronometer was absolute. 88 minutes before the next warp gale surge would make extraction impossible. The Imperium storms ravaging this sector followed patterns regular as clockwork, and our shuttle's machine spirit would not survive another psychic hurricane. My team moved with the disciplined efficiency of those accustomed to impossibility. 3 battle-hardened Khazarkan whose names I was not privileged to know, their faces hidden behind rebreather masks that hissed with each breath. Magos Logistor Zerion advanced with mechanical precision, sensor dendrites tasting vacuum for data streams, while his augmetic limbs clicked against deck plates. The Sister of Battle accompanied us in marble silence, her power armor bearing no identifying marks, her presence a null field that made reality feel thinner. The unnamed Inquisitor who led our mission carried authority absolute and purposes unknowable, his gaze weighing each of us and finding us insufficient. As we advanced through corridors that felt more like inspection routes than escape paths, environmental details crawled under my skin like parasites. The hexagonal paving stones were arranged 1 degree off pattern, creating subtle visual discord that made my eyes water. Spent power cells scattered across the deck bore identical inscriptions etched in precise Gothic script. Hold the line. The phrase repeated endlessly, carved into metal with obsessive uniformity, as if the words themselves had become prayer, mantra, final desperate command. Frost clung to every surface in geometric patterns, hexagons within hexagons, crystalline fractals that hurt to observe directly. Our breath misted despite environmental seals. and ice formed on exposed metal with unnatural hunger. The cold felt wrong, not merely absence of heat, but something actively devouring warmth and leaving emptiness in its wake. My chronometer read local time, but time felt fluid here, stretched like taffy in a child's hands. My heartbeat began synchronizing to an alien rhythm that felt familiar as childhood lullabies, yet filled me with inexplicable dread. 8 beats, 13 beats, then silence before the pattern repeated. The cadence thrummed beneath my ribs like a second heart, resonating through deck plates that sang with subsonic frequency. External radiation rising, 13.0 Hz subharmonic detected. The Magos reported through Vox Link, his synthesized voice crackling with interference. The same frequency hummed through our bones, a vibration that seemed to resonate in sinew and marrow. I noticed the headless corpses had begun tracking our movement with eyeless precision, their stumps turning toward us like flowers following the sun. Their parade formation remained perfect, but now they faced our direction with attention that transcended death. The sight made primal terror clench my stomach like a fist. The air tasted of ozone and old lass fire, the penny tang of blood that had boiled away ages past. Nothing smelled because there was no atmosphere to carry scent, yet I breathed memories of cordite and consecrated oil. Someone had etched liturgical fragments into bulkhead welds, not high Gothic or ecclesiarchal script, but duty rosters lettered with artists' care. Names of boys I had never met but could envision in the way names carry faces. As we passed beneath a flickering lumen strip, my disconnected Vox unit crackled to impossible life. The power cell hung dead on my belt, deliberately severed to prevent accidental transmission, standard procedure when dealing with potential warp contamination. Yet static resolved into a voice I recognized with bone-deep certainty, clear as cathedral bells, despite the impossibility of transmission. "Voss?" my mother's voice whispered through the dead speaker, carrying the same gentle authority she had used when correcting my posture during childhood drill practice in our hab-block courtyard. Her tone held warmth and command in perfect measure, the voice that had taught me to stand straight, to honor the line, to never break formation no matter the cost. "Dress right, dress right." The words struck like physical blows, and I felt my body respond without volition. Shoulders squaring, spine straightening, feet shifting to proper parade spacing. Around me, the headless guardsmen executed identical movements in perfect synchronization, their boots scraping against deck plates in rhythm that matched my suddenly hammering heart. The 8-8-13 cadence pounded through my skull like artillery. Each beat a command I could not refuse. 87 minutes until extraction. 87 minutes to uncover the truth behind this blasphemous miracle. The Last Stand held secrets that defied comprehension, and I feared we were already too late to escape them. We advanced by the book because books are all that keep a Cadian from stepping off into the void. The methodical progression through corridors that felt more like ceremonial processional routes than military thoroughfares spoke to training drilled so deep it transcended conscious thought. My team moved with the disciplined efficiency of those accustomed to impossibility. 3 battle-hardened Kasserkin whose names I was not privileged to know. Magos Logistor Zerion with his sensor dendrites tasting vacuum for data streams. The unnamed Sister of Battle whose presence created a null field that made reality feel thinner, and the Inquisitor whose authority absolute guided our mission into the heart of this blasphemous miracle. Magos Logistor Zerion padded ahead, iron feet touching hex after hex with insect confidence. Mechadendrites fanned like whiskers. His auspex lattice flickered and spat falsehoods, then locked to something deeper than power or signal. Through VoxLink, his synthesized voice reported findings that chilled me more than the void-touched air. 13.0 Hz primary frequency confirmed, with clear 8 Hz harmonic overlay. Signal propagation suggests embedded command structure, hymnal imperatives cycling through failing auspex grid. He did not say him, but I heard the word inside his machine voice. The station carried orders like a chapel carries incense, saturating everything so thoroughly you forgot there was ever air without it. Stand fast, hold ranks, no retreat. The litany repeated in frequencies below hearing, transmitted through deck plates and atmospheric processors into bone and sinew where duty lived deeper than conscious thought. Environmental hazards multiplied the way prayers do at the edge of battle. Vacuum pockets snapped at exposed joints with greedy, invisible mouths, creating micro-decompression events that left frost flowers blooming across our visors in geometric patterns too, perfect for natural formation. The crystalline growths formed hexagons within hexagons, fractals that hurt to observe directly, yet drew the eye with mathematical precision. My knee gasket burped and resealed with a cough that jolted my bones. Temperature dropped in patient increments, not a storm but a verdict, and ash moved where there should not have been movement, drifting like liturgical incense through weightless eddies born of thermal size. It ribboned and curled, always in formation, never tumbling, gray particles that moved with purpose despite having no air currents to carry them. We passed bulkheads tattooed with prayers that were also orders. Field-engraved litanies burned into the paint with las fire covered every surface, letters precise despite desperation, lines straight as drill cords. Each phrase terminated in a pattern of dots drilled into the metal with machine tool precision. 8813, 8813, a catechism in punctuation. Hold the line, hold the line, hold the line. The words were not decoration. They had the hard shine of function, speaking of desperate creativity when repetition threatened to dull meaning through familiarity. The sister of battle moved like a bell of silence through a field of faint noise, her presence creating eddies in reality that made my teeth ache. Frost-sprouted hairline cracks when she passed, like the ice itself recoiling from her null. Yet even she flinched as we passed certain intersections, minute and involuntary, not response to cold or pain, but something that resonated against her emptiness and found no purchase. Her null field rippled, servo motors stuttering as blessed machinery hesitated before some presence that existed beyond the material realm. I noted the telling absences with growing unease. No scavenger cuts on plasteel, no Hierotex sigils spray-chalked on saints' faces, no claw gouges in places where chaos always seems to leave its signature, no rot. Whatever killed these men had done so cleanly that entropy had turned away, embarrassed. The corridors showed battle damage from original fighting, lost scorches and bolt crater patterns, but nothing since. Time had stopped here, preserving the moment of final defiance like insects trapped in amber. More disturbing still was the absence of chaos corruption despite the eye's proximity. Something held the Imperium at bay through sheer force of disciplined will. When our Inquisitor paused beneath a sagging arch and began the Catechism of Fortitude, "We are the wall. We do not yield. Flesh is stone, bones are bastions." Each syllable struck the subharmonic like mallet on drumhead. His words synchronized perfectly with the underlying beat, thrumming through deck plates, the litany that should have brought comfort instead feeling like submission. Even inquisitorial will bent to accommodate the deeper song pulsing through this place. Comms frag, Binharik, triplet, null stabilization zones detected, vectoring, markers, Xerion transmitted, the machine language slicing thin lines through my skull. Areas of lower variance in Imperium pressure, pockets where the hymn coheres and binds air. Private Valerius, one of the Casercan, unconsciously adjusted her lace gun sling with movements that suggested muscle memory responding to training drums only she could hear. Her breathing synchronized to the 8-8-13 pattern, and when she blink-clicked her weapon's safety, the motion fell perfectly into the station's rhythm. She showed no awareness of the synchronization, but her body moved with parade ground precision despite our tactical formation. The flagged route to command sanctum revealed itself in restrained pageantry, old banners of Khazar Tors folded into triangle shadows, brass honor plates sealed under ice like insects trapped in amber. At the sanctum stairwell, we discovered artifacts arranged with ceremonial precision on a prayer plinth carved from granite. A parade mace lay crossed with a colonel's crimson sash, both items positioned with exact spacing required by regimental protocol. The mace bore inscriptions in High Gothic, names of battles, dates of service, honors earned through blood and sacrifice. The sash showed wear patterns consistent with decades of use, yet both artifacts remained perfectly preserved. When my gloved hand touched the crimson cloth, warmth surged through synth leather and plasteel into nerve. Heat foreign to this place's predatory cold. 88 beats per minute, exactly. The pulse ran down my arm and nested under my sternum. My personal auspex chimed in confusion, then synchronized, then went silent as if saluting. The sash's warmth had intention, the way a hand on your shoulder has intention when it means to steady you and force you to face what comes. It seemed to know me, to acknowledge bloodline and breeding that connected me to the men who had worn it before their final stand. Behind us, the headless guardsmen had begun to move, boots scraping against deck plates in perfect synchronization as they advanced through corridors that reshaped themselves to accommodate parade routes. The sound echoed like distant thunder, the march of the dead keeping time with my suddenly racing heart. 74 minutes until extraction. The command sanctum waited above, holding secrets that might explain this blasphemous miracle or damn us all to share in its eternal vigil. We entered the hexagonal drill square through a blast portal that irised open like a cathedral door revealing an altar of impossible geometry. The space stretched 60 meters across, its deck marked with parade lines that gleamed through accumulated frost like ceremonial silver inlaid with devotional precision. 3 sides opened to the void through shielded rents, their translucent energy fields shimmering with tired halos that flickered in rhythm with failing generators deep in the station's belly. Beyond the barriers, debris rotated in stately procession. Broken Aquila standards, snapped banner poles, ceramite fragments that caught starlight and returned it as dull sacrament. The eye of terror burned like an infected wound against the darkness, its malevolent radiance casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. The square should have been silent as death, airless as the void beyond its failing shields. Instead, it breathed with the memory of war so dense it reached through our environmental seals and laid fingers on our throats. An impossible battle was being fought here without combatants, a conflict preserved in temporal amber that repeated with mechanical precision. Last fire streaks hung in the rarefied air like red threads pulled taut across a cosmic loom, energy beams that should have dissipated nanoseconds after discharge, instead maintaining coherent form across impossible distances. Each beam carved perfect trajectories through nothing, then flared against invisible targets, spalling dust and ceramite fragments from shapes that existed only in the echo of desperate last stands. The volley sheared past my shoulder with heat that scorched ceramite where no weapon existed to fire it. The beam carved a precise groove through my pauldron's paint, leaving a cauterized line that smoked in the thin atmosphere. I smelled ozone and burnt cloth through my rebreather's filters, an impossibility in vacuum that my brain insisted on processing anyway. The sting on my skin was real enough, phantom heat that made nerve endings scream warnings about energy discharge that had never occurred. Through my earpiece, a voice crackled with sergeant's authority despite speaking to empty air. 2, 3, 8, hold. The count echoed through the square with parade ground precision, each number falling into the 8-8-13 rhythm that had become the station's heartbeat. Private Valerius, the Kasserkin, flanking our advance, suddenly jerked as if slapped by an invisible hand. Blood bloomed beneath her armor's shoulder joint, a cauterized wound appearing without warning, perfectly circular and smoking with residual heat. No las beam had struck her, no weapon had fired, yet she bled from an injury inflicted by nothing more substantial than memory made manifest. Her breathing hitched with pain and confusion, but she maintained formation with the discipline of those bred for war. The wound was real, the blood was real. The weapon that inflicted it existed only in the fossilized obedience of battles fought and lost. Magos Logistor Zerion's sensor dendrites arced and froze, their tips vibrating as if tasting a note that existed beyond normal perception. Through VoxLink, his synthesized voice delivered findings that chilled me more than void-touched air. Temporal lockset detected. Chronological displacement fixed to imperative language patterns. The commands issued during original engagement have achieved persistence through repetition and will. Space-time itself has been conscripted to serve. His words carried the weight of revelation wrapped in technical jargon, but I heard the underlying horror. Reality had been broken by the simple act of refusing to surrender. Discipline becoming physics through sheer force of accumulated duty. Religious dread permeated my thoughts like incense smoke, thick and cloying and impossible to escape. I found myself mouthing childhood catechisms, learned at my mother's knee, words that had once brought comfort now serving as anchors against the tide of impossibility. We are the wall. Stones do not fear the storm, flesh burns, spirit stands. The familiar phrases steadied my hands as they trembled inside armored gauntlets, providing structure when structure seemed the only thing preventing complete dissolution into madness. Faith became function, prayer became procedure, and both served to maintain the thin barriers between ordered thought and gibbering terror. The sister of battle lifted her fist in the sign for absolute silence, her null field rippling with disturbance that made reality shiver like heat haze. She sensed presences in formation behind us. Not the headless guardsman we had passed, but something more fundamental. Absence arranged as ranks, emptiness organized with military precision, the spaces where soldiers should stand holding shape through sheer force of disciplined will. Her gauntleted hand trembled almost imperceptibly, the only sign that even her blessed emptiness struggled against whatever pressed at the boundaries of perception. Environmental wind began to move where there should have been none, carrying ash snow that drifted through the square in perfect parade formation despite the vacuum that should have made atmospheric movement impossible. The particles maintained precise spacing as they fell in ranks, and files toward deck plates that rang like drumheads under our boots. Each flake seemed to know its place in formation, gray motes that moved with purpose and discipline even in death. The drill grid vibrated with subsonic frequency that resonated through armor and into bone, a rhythm that felt familiar as heartbeat yet alien as the song of dying stars. Telemetry, stuttering power in void shields, variance 9% and climbing, Zerion reported through increasingly fragmented Vox channels. The station's protective barriers wavered under stress that had nothing to do with external pressure and everything to do with the weight of accumulated duty pressing against the boundaries of reality. Each flicker of the shields coincided with a stronger beat of the unseen drum, as if the very act of maintaining formation was draining power from life support systems. We crossed the square by the numbers, each step calculated to avoid the primary grid intersections where phantom fire concentrated its fury. Valerius limped but maintained position, her breath crisp and even on Vox, despite the cauterized wound that wept blood through her armor's seals. The other Kasurkin moved, like shadows wrapped in ceramite, muzzles always a degree off the firing lines now that we knew. The lines themselves were hungry for targets. I realized with creeping shame that I had been holding my rifle as if on review rather than in combat, the barrel high and proud when it should have been low and ready. The square's far doors slammed shut without pressure differential to drive them, massive blast portals sealing with finality that echoed through the chamber like the closing of a tomb. The sound was a command, a punctuation mark that made the very air ring with authority. In that echo, distorted by distance and desperation, we heard our own names barked in parade cadence by a voice that knew our precise intonations, inflections, and the way each syllable should be shaped by lips and tongue trained in Cadian drill protocol. Magos Logistor Zerion, present. Sister Cordelia, present. Private Valerius, present. The roll call proceeded with ceremonial precision, each name delivered with authority that transcended death and defied rational explanation. The voice saved the best for last, drawing out each syllable with the care of a craftsman shaping precious metal, building to a crescendo that made my bones ache with recognition. Corporal Merrick Voss, step out. The command struck like a physical blow, compelling obedience through mechanisms older than thought and deeper than fear. My body began to move without conscious volition, boots scraping against deck plates in the precise rhythm of parade ground advancement. 63 minutes until extraction. The drill square waited with infinite patience, ready to add our names to its eternal roster of the disciplined dead. We broke the drill square's spell through the only defense a soldier truly possesses, moving as a disciplined unit when individual will fails against impossible commands. The order to step out had tugged at my tendons like wire, each syllable a magnetic force threatening to drag me from formation. But Sister Cordelia's gauntleted hand hooked my harness and held me steady while Magos Logistor Zerion set a counter-rhythm on our Vox channels. His metronome beat shifted half a breath off the 8-8-13 cadence, and by marching deliberately out of phase, we slipped the temporal lock's teeth like soldiers learning to break step on bridges lest their synchronized footfalls bring down the span. The blast doors beyond the drill square recognized our approach with the deference due to rank, armored leaves folding back in silent obeisance to reveal a sanctum that married chapel and command bunker without architectural contradiction. This was a place built for prayer and warfare, where the rituals of faith and the protocols of siege had been woven into a single tapestry of devotional violence. Vox altars rose from the deck in tiered formations like pulpits arranged for congregation, their brass casings opened and stacked with prayer scrolls wound through cable spools until litanies and machine language became indistinguishable. The scrolls bore duty rosters written in devotional script, names of the dead arranged with liturgical precision, each line a verse in the hymn of service that possessed no final stanza. Tactical charts overlaid with benedictions covered the walls beside map-engraved plasteel, firing solutions blessed by chaplains hanging in brass frames next to ammunition counts that read, like sacred numerology, everything spoke of faith weaponized and devotion made manifest through organized violence in service to the Golden Throne. Candles had been replaced by lumen nodes hooded in black cloth, their light reduced to penitent glow that made frost glitter like reliquary dust across surfaces that should have been too warm for ice formation. At the sanctum's heart, mounted on a mechanicus lattice of perfect geometry, sat the object that transformed the chamber from mere shrine into beating heart of impossibility. Matte black stone drank light and returned only outline, its surface veined with channels that suggested illumination without ever granting it, anti-radiance that cast no shadows, yet revealed everything with surgical clarity. The artifact rested on blessed adamantium and consecrated copper, cables and fiber optics threading through the support structure like neural pathways in a mechanical brain designed to commune with forces beyond mortal comprehension. Magos Logistor Zerion approached with movements that balanced reverence against scientific hunger, his mechadendrites extending toward the relic with trembling precision that spoke of recognition deeper than mere identification. Through VoxLink, his synthesized voice carried tones I had never heard from machine spirits, awe mixed with terror, worship tempered by understanding of consequences that stretched across sectors and millennia. Blackstone, he whispered, the word emerging from his Vox grill like prayer torn from silicon lips. Fragment of Cadian pylon, psychic anchor made portable. Anti-Imperium vector geometry contained within null resonance cage. Blessed be its angles and sacred its mathematics. He spoke of crystalline matrices and warp-dampening fields with religious awe that transformed technical analysis into devotional testimony, describing how the very substance that had held the eye of terror at bay for 10,000 years had been concentrated into portable form. The shard represented everything the Adeptus Mechanicus sought, the marriage of faith and function, the divine made manifest through understanding of sacred geometry and blessed engineering that could reshape reality through pure application of disciplined will. Sister Cordelia took 3 steps toward the reliquary before her body rebelled against proximity to something that challenged the fundamental nature of her blessed emptiness. She doubled over and retched, despite environmental seals that should have prevented such biological responses, her power armor's servo motors whining under stress as competing null fields interacted in ways that defied conventional understanding. Her null field roared like gale force winds near the shard, creating interference patterns that made reality ripple like water, disturbed by stones cast from impossible heights. The blessed void that defined her existence as one of the Emperor's chosen daughters met active negation, emptiness colliding with absence in ways that produced effects neither had anticipated. Cold descended with predatory hunger, not mere absence of heat, but something actively devouring warmth and leaving crystalline emptiness in its wake. I felt the temperature drop beyond measurement into realms where cold became a living entity that hummed in bones and sang in marrow with frequencies that bypassed hearing and spoke directly to the calcium framework holding flesh in human shape. My teeth ached with harmonics that existed below perception, vibrations that transformed skeleton into resonating chamber for songs older than civilization and more patient than entropy itself. The Inquisitor's eyes moistened as he contemplated the artifact's implications, tears forming despite environmental controls, as his voice emerged in whisper, wrapped in wonder and horror. A weapon to bind whole regiments unbreakable. Discipline made absolute through psychic anchor. The perfect tool for creating soldiers who cannot retreat, cannot surrender, cannot disobey. His gaze held weight of possibilities that stretched across crusades, the power to transform human will into adamantium chains binding spirit as surely as flesh to eternal service. The Blackstone pulsed in rhythm that had become familiar as heartbeat yet remained alien as dying stars. 8 beats, 13 beats, then silence before the pattern repeated with mechanical precision. Each wave flattened Vox noise to absolute silence, creating pockets of perfect quiet that made our breathing sound like thunder and heartbeats, like artillery bombardment. The pulse synchronized with neural pathways governing reflex and instinct, primitive mechanisms that kept soldiers standing when reason demanded retreat. Environmental details accumulated with obsessive precision that spoke of forces beyond natural law, asserting control over physical reality. Condensation beaded on lasgun housings, despite humidity levels insufficient for moisture formation, droplets arranging themselves in straight lines as if ordered by invisible drill sergeants, who demanded perfection even from water vapor. The moisture moved with purpose, forming geometric patterns that hurt to observe directly, yet drew the eye with mathematical beauty that suggested meaning beyond mere physics. Around the reliquary's base, mummified arms extended from deck plates like offerings placed by desperate supplicants, each limb bearing regimental tattoos that formed circular pattern reminiscent of devotional rosaries. The markings, aquilas and regimental numbers, battle honors and service records were pinned to desiccated flesh by brass nails driven through skin with surgical precision. Prayer knots hung from each nail, blessed cord twisted into devotional forms that spoke of faith maintained even unto death and beyond. These arms belonged to soldiers who had crawled here in final moments, offering flesh as anchor points for whatever ritual had transformed discipline into physics and duty into natural law. Comms, personal biometrics synchronizing across all team members, Zerion reported through increasingly fragmented channels as our heartbeats aligned without conscious effort, breathing patterns matching the reliquary's pulse, while biological systems submitted to external rhythm with disturbing eagerness. The synchronization felt natural as parade drill, comfortable as shared prayer, yet carried implications that made rational thought recoil from full comprehension of what we were becoming. As the Magos extended fiber optic cables toward the reliquary's manifold ports, preparing to interface blessed machine with alien artifact, the chamber's chapel vox crackled to life with authority that brooked no argument. The voice emerged in clipped parade patter that spoke of discipline maintained through decades of service and death. Form up, Colonel on deck. All personnel to positions of attention. A blast door slid open with hydraulic precision, revealing corridor that stretched beyond visual range into darkness that swallowed light without offering anything in return. From that darkness emerged footsteps with metronomic precision, left, right, the measured cadence of an officer who had never learned to walk, without commanding respect from deck plates and bulkheads alike. The corpse that entered wore dress blues pressed to parade perfection, despite decades of wear, brass buttons polished to mirror brightness that reflected light from sources that did not exist. It walked in perfect step, each movement calculated to maintain regulation spacing and bearing that would have earned commendation from the most demanding drill instructor. The body showed signs of mummification, yet maintained posture that spoke of pride undimmed by death, discipline unbroken by passage of time that had reduced flesh to leather and bone to ceramic hardness. 51 minutes until extraction. The colonel had arrived to conduct his final inspection, and we were about to discover what orders could survive the death of those who issued them. In the sanctum's growing silence, I heard the sound of an entire regiment forming ranks in corridors that should have been empty, boots scraping against deck plates in rhythm that matched my suddenly thundering heart. The figure that emerged from the sanctum's depths revealed itself as something far more disturbing than mere preservation, a composite entity that married Cadian discipline with mechanicus artifice in ways that violated natural law while serving sacred duty. The desiccated officer's body had been systematically modified, brass sensor tubes threading through tissue Like devotional piercings, their hollow chambers designed to carry incense, now serving as conduits for whatever force animated this amalgamation of flesh and blessed machinery. Cogitator coils wrapped around the spine in precise spirals, blessed copper wire grafted directly into vertebrae to create communion between human will and machine logic that transcended the boundaries between life and death. Where the jaw should have been, a vox grill of regimental pattern gleamed with mirror brightness, the same model used for parade commands and battlefield coordination throughout the Cadian military hierarchy. No breath moved through those metal lips, no moisture gathered on surfaces that should have shown signs of respiration, yet the device hummed with potential energy that made my teeth ache with sympathetic vibration. The colonel walked without sound, despite boots that should have scraped against deck plates, movement that defied physics while maintaining perfect parade ground bearing that spoke of discipline unbroken by death itself. When it began the drill recitations, my throat responded before conscious thought could intervene. "Present arms," the vox grill commanded, and the words emerged from my lips with muscle memory older than reason, syllables shaped by childhood training that had carved pathways deeper than individual will. The compulsion flowed through channels that predated conscious thought, not psychic coercion, but something more fundamental, authority that operated through mechanisms carved by evolution to ensure survival of the group even when individual members faced annihilation. Around me, my team responded with horrifying uniformity, despite Sister Cordelia's null field pressing against the sanctum like atmospheric pressure before a storm. The blessed emptiness that should have protected us from supernatural influence proved insufficient against something that operated through discipline rather than sorcery, compulsion that flowed through channels carved by decades of obedience rather than warp-touched coercion. Kasurkan fingers aligned along handguards in perfect unison, muscle memory overriding tactical awareness as training protocols activated without conscious command. Private Valerius raised her last pistol to her temple with mechanical precision, the barrel positioned to maintain perfect sightline down an imaginary rank that existed only in the colonel's preserved memories. The realization struck me like a bolt shell. She was completing the geometry the room demanded, her body seeking to preserve formation even unto death. I lunged forward and knocked the weapon from her grasp, the last pistol clattering across deck plates that rang like bells. "Break step," I hissed, meaning everything by those two words, and she blinked hard behind her lenses, while reality flexed in irritation around us. Body horror manifested with surgical precision as the litany continued its inexorable recitation. Lumpy scars on my forearms began to swell, old training wounds from childhood drill practice reshaping themselves into chevrons that spoke of rank earned through blood and maintained through discipline that transcended flesh. The raised tissue formed perfect geometric patterns, skin aligning in neat ridges like parade braiding stitched under the epidermis by invisible hands. Condensation formed lance-straight lines down my face despite environmental seals, moisture moving with purpose that defied natural law while following commands issued by authority that had survived death through sheer force of accumulated will. Sister Cordelia pressed both hands against her helmet, servo motors whining under stress, as her blessed emptiness struggled against infection that spread through channels deeper than psychic influence. Her null field rippled like water disturbed by stones cast from impossible heights. Yet even she was not immune to the colonel's authority. Her lips moved in silent response to commands that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to neural pathways governing obedience and military bearing. Magos Logistor Zerion's sensor dendrites arced and froze as he processed data that challenged fundamental understanding of how reality functioned. Through increasingly fragmented Vox channels, his synthesized voice delivered analysis wrapped in technical terminology that carried weight of revelation, imperative language patterns embedded within Blackstone resonance matrix. The shard's anti-Imperium geometry couples to motor cortices via vibrational entrainment. Commands achieve persistence through repetition and will, compelling motor responses through direct neural interface. Faith given frequency, duty given vector. I attempted the catechism of refusal, words learned in childhood to resist corruption and maintain individual will against forces that sought to subsume personal identity into collective purpose. I am my own. My will is mine. No voice commands save the Emperor's own. The familiar phrases emerged from my lips, like prayers torn from a throat that no longer fully belonged to me, but they fell flat against the cant's power, dissolving into the pervasive hum like rounds striking a void shield and evaporating as heat haze. Environmental motifs deepened as the litany reached crescendo, reality reshaping itself to accommodate forces that demanded geometric perfection from chaos and disorder. Frost crystals bloomed in rosettes of 6 across every surface, their mathematical precision speaking of order imposed through will rather than natural formation. As the Vox grill's voice rose in authority, the patterns shifted to rosettes of 8, then 13, following numerical sequences that had become the station's heartbeat, with crystalline precision that made reality itself snap to attention. Comms, personal biometrics drifting towards synchronized 88 beats per minute across all. Team members, Zerion reported through channels that crackled with interference. Our hearts beat in unison without conscious effort, breathing patterns matching the reliquary's pulse, while biological systems submitted to external rhythm with treacherous eagerness that made rational thought recoil from implications too vast for mortal comprehension. The composite kernel completed its recitation and turned the Vox grill toward me with mechanical precision that spoke of targeting systems calibrated for maximum psychological impact. When it spoke, the voice emerged in my mother's exact cadence, not mere imitation but perfect reproduction of inflection and tone that had shaped my earliest understanding of duty and service. The words carried weight of bloodline and breeding, authority that flowed through genetic channels carved by generations of Cadian service to the Golden Throne. Blood of Khazar Tors, the colonel whispered through brass mesh that had never known moisture, each syllable delivered with ceremonial precision that made reality lean forward in anticipation. You have command by birthright. The line requires orders. The dead await dismissal. Speak, and they will obey unto the heat death of the universe itself. Reality held its breath around my next word, potential energy building like atmospheric pressure before a storm that could reshape continents. The Blackstone pulsed with increasing frequency, its alien mathematics calculating trajectories that stretched across sectors and millennia. In corridors beyond the sanctum, I heard the sound of an entire regiment forming ranks, boots scraping against deck plates in rhythm that matched my thundering heart, weapons clicking to ready positions, voices murmuring responses to commands that had never ended despite the death of those who issued them. 43 minutes until extraction. The weight of command settled on my shoulders like ceremonial sash, authority I had never sought pressing against consciousness that struggled to maintain individual will against forces that demanded absolute obedience. The colonel waited with infinite patience, Vox grill humming with potential that could transform human discipline into natural law. Around me, my team stood at positions of attention, bodies responding to authority that flowed through channels deeper than thought and older than civilization itself. The next word I spoke would determine whether we escaped this sanctum as individuals or remained forever as components in a machine designed to wage eternal war against entropy itself. My tongue lifted to my teeth, old commands queuing in my throat with practiced obedience. Reality leaned closer, eager to learn what orders could survive the death of those who issued them. The weight of authority settled on my shoulders, like ceremonial sash woven from live wire, each thread carrying current that transformed individual will into something larger and infinitely more terrible. When I cleared my throat to test the extent of this newfound power, Sister Cordelia's head snapped to attention with servo-motor precision despite her null field's protective embrace. The reaction was involuntary, instinctive, her blessed emptiness proving insufficient against compulsion that flowed through channels carved by evolution itself, the deep neural pathways that ensured survival of the group, even when individual members faced annihilation. Magos Logistor Zerion's sensor dendrites trembled as they processed data streams flowing from the composite entity, his synthesized voice carrying tones of discovery mixed with horror, as understanding crystallized into terrible clarity. Castellan Protocol Savant, designation Cadian Muster 23, he whispered through Vox channels that crackled with interference. Morale engine originally grafted to enhance regimental discipline during siege operations. Neural cortex replaced with cogitator matrix designed to broadcast imperative cant through localized Vox fields. During Cadia's final hours, the construct was wired directly to the pylon shard to anchor courage in the face of planetary annihilation. The revelation struck like bolt shell to chest. This thing had been designed to maintain order. When mortal will faltered, a machine built to whisper courage into ears of soldiers facing impossible odds. But the pylon's destruction had transformed tool into tyrant, discipline into physics, suggestion into natural law that bound reality itself to parade ground precision. The parade master represented the logical endpoint of military efficiency, authority so absolute it could command obedience from dust and vacuum, from time itself. Its optical sensors completed their genealogical scan with mechanical precision that spoke of databases spanning millennia, brass lenses whirring as they focused on details invisible to human perception. Through the Vox grill, deference emerged that made my skin crawl with implications. Bloodline confirmed. Kasser Tor's genetic markers, 7th generation command genealogy, tribal scarification patterns beneath epidermis match authority vectors. Drill cant keyed to family cadences detected through vocal analysis. Gene echo maternal authority patterns, deferential protocol engaged. The machine recognized me not through biological markers alone, but through the Cadian drill cant that flowed in my blood, the unspoken rhythm of tribal tattoos beneath my skin that spoke of breeding and bloodline stretching back to Cadia's first settlement. It deferred to my genealogy with chilling precision of a machine recognizing higher authority in its own programming, ancient hierarchies coded into flesh and bone through generations of selective breeding and cultural indoctrination. Power and dread coiled in my throat as I realized every syllable I uttered tugged at joints and eyes around me with mechanical precision. Iron taste filled my mouth as the protocol began adding Binharic lilt to my words, machine language harmonics threading through human speech to create hybrid communication that spoke to flesh and circuitry with equal authority. My voice emerged carrying overtones I had never produced, frequencies that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to neural pathways governing obedience and motor control. Testing the extent of this terrifying inheritance, I spoke a single word with parade ground precision: at ease. The command rippled through the sanctum like shockwave, reality bending to accommodate imperative that carried weight of accumulated duty. In the drill square beyond, the headless guardsman creaked as joints that had maintained perfect posture for decades attempted to shift to rest position. A collective groan, like ancient timbers under strain, emanated from their ranks as mag-locked boots scraped against deck plates. But they didn't fully obey, frozen between commands, caught in temporal amber that held them prisoner to the last order they had received in life. Emboldened yet horrified by partial success, I spoke another word that carried more weight, more authority, more terrible finality. Hold. The command lanced through bone like cold light, freezing everything in sphere of influence that extended beyond the sanctum into corridors and chambers throughout the station. Dust motes hung motionless in air that had become solid as crystal. Vapor condensation stopped mid-formation on metal surfaces. Even photons seemed to slow as they passed through space that had been conscripted to serve absolute discipline. Sister Cordelia's hand moved in rapid sign language despite temporal distortion, her blessed emptiness allowing limited movement through the frozen zone as she signaled alarm and urgent tactical warning. Her null field created eddies in the effect, pockets where time moved at normal speed, while reality struggled to accommodate competing authorities. Blessed void meeting active negation in ways that produced interference patterns visible to naked eye. The unnamed Inquisitor's gaze fixed on tactical possibilities with hunger that transcended mere ambition, his eyes reflecting calculations that spanned sectors and millennia as he contemplated weapons that could transform human will into adamantium chains. Through partially frozen lips, he whispered words that carried weight of Ordo's authority. Imagine regiments that cannot retreat, soldiers who obey unto death and beyond, the perfect tool for eternal crusade. Telemetry, local time dilation spike detected, chronometer variance 0.7 seconds per second. Zerion reported through channels that struggled against temporal distortion. Reality had become elastic, stretching and contracting in response to commands that carried authority older than civilization and more patient than entropy itself. The numbers crawled along my retinal display, making me nauseous as I contemplated implications of power that could slow time through pure force of discipline. Will environmental effects deepened as the litany's influence spread through station systems. Frost crystals bloomed in rosettes that shifted from 6 points to 8 to 13 with crystalline precision, each formation speaking of mathematics, imposed through will rather than natural law. Condensation beaded on weapon housings despite insufficient humidity, droplets arranging themselves in straight lines as if ordered by invisible drill sergeants who demanded perfection even from water vapor. The parade master's skull pivoted with mechanical precision toward blast door set into sanctum's lower level, optical sensors focusing on readings that spoke of immediate tactical concern. Through Vox Grill, its voice emerged with clipped efficiency that brooked no argument. Enemy breaching, hull integrity compromised. Iron Warriors 4th Grand Company detected. Siege specialists. They come for the shard. They come for the song. Auto alarms began tripping throughout station, klaxons wailing with mechanical precision as something heavy burned through adamantium hull, plating with contemptuous ease. The sound carried harmonics that answered the same drum beating through station's heart. Not random destruction, but purposeful assault, conducted with military precision that spoke of enemies who understood value of discipline and sought to claim it for their own twisted purposes. Through deck plates that vibrated with sympathetic resonance, I felt rhythm of coordinated movement, boots striking metal in synchronized cadence, weapons cycling with mechanical precision, voices raised in chants that carried authority borrowed from sources older than Imperium itself. Whatever approached moved with discipline that rivaled our own, order that had been twisted to serve purposes antithetical to everything Cadian military tradition represented. The breach burned through final layers of hull plating with surgical precision, each cut calculated to maximize psychological effect while preserving structural integrity of whatever lay within. Sparks fell through grating like shower of votive stars coming to rest in even ranks as ember buds refused to roll out of alignment. The smell came anyway, burned oil, scorched paint, old prayers searing off bulkhead where heat met cold in collision that spoke of forces beyond natural law. Reality held its breath around my next command, potential energy building like atmospheric pressure before storm that could reshape continents. The authority flowing through me carried weight of bloodlines and breeding, power that could command obedience from vacuum itself. Yet every syllable brought us closer to transformation that would leave us as components in machine designed to wage eternal war. 37 minutes until extraction. The parade master waited with infinite patience, Vox grill humming with potential that could transform human discipline into natural law. Through temporal distortion and gathering darkness, I prepared to speak words that would either save us or damn us to eternal service in armies that knew no retreat, no surrender, no end to the long watch against entropy itself. The blast door buckled under assault that answered station's rhythm with counterpoint, designed to shatter rather than preserve, chaos meeting order in collision that would determine whether discipline served emperor or darker masters who understood its true potential. The truth assembled itself from cascading data streams, like components in a weapon designed to fire bullets made of human will, each revelation clicking into place with mechanical precision that spoke of forces beyond mortal comprehension. Magos Logistor Zerion's sensor dendrites arced and froze as they processed information that challenged fundamental understanding of reality itself. His synthesized voice emerging through Vox channels, crackling with interference born of proximity to power that transcended individual consciousness. The hold cant propagated through Blackstone matrix at moment of planetary rupture, he whispered, each word carrying weight of discovery wrapped in horror that made my bones ache with sympathetic resonance. Not merely command, but crystallized imperative embedded in space-time itself. Order becoming physics. The shard captured Cadia's final moment of defiance and transformed it into natural law. The revelation struck like artillery bombardment against consciousness that struggled to process implications too vast for mortal mind. This was no mere haunting or temporal echo, but something far more insidious and absolute. The pylon fragment had bound not just the soldiers who stood their ground, but the very concept of standing ground itself. The cant had latched onto Cadian bloodlines through mechanisms older than thought, freezing their last stand across time and space with mathematical precision that made entropy itself salute and hold position. The shard's song wove itself through DNA sequences carrying tribal markers, Zerion continued, his voice acquiring liturgical weight as understanding crystallized into terrible clarity, through neural pathways carved by childhood drill practice, through cultural patterns defining Cadian identity in ways transcending mere planetary origin. Bloodlines became conduits for authority flowing like current through copper wire, the dead stand because the word never ended. I felt the truth settle in my chest like cold iron, each syllable reshaping understanding of what we faced. The order to hold position continued propagating through Blackstone resonance, binding not just flesh, but names, tattoos, habits, muscle memory carved by decades of service. Every aspect of Cadian military culture had become anchor point for imperative that refused to acknowledge defeat, creating matrix where discipline transformed into physics and duty became natural law. The unnamed inquisitor's voice turned liturgical as he contemplated applications stretching across crusades and millennia, his words emerging with ceremonial precision that spoke of possibilities too vast for mortal comprehension. "Imagine the doctrinal applications," he whispered through lips trembling with anticipation. "Imprint the order on any regiment for perfect discipline. Soldiers who cannot retreat, cannot surrender, cannot disobey, the ultimate weapon against entropy itself. Human will transformed into adamantium chains, binding reality to imperial purpose." His eyes reflected calculations spanning sectors as he envisioned armies that would march until heat death of the universe. Regiments bound by imperatives transcending flesh and bone, to operate through mechanisms older than civilization itself. The tactical possibilities made him weep with joy and terror in equal measure, tears forming despite environmental controls as he contemplated power that could reshape human nature through pure application of disciplined authority. Sister Cordelia's voice emerged through clenched teeth as her blessed emptiness struggled against infection spreading through channels deeper than psychic influence, her null field rippling like water, disturbed by stones cast from impossible heights. "Anchor chains bind warp things too," she warned through servo motors whining under stress. "The cant holds more than soldiers in place. If the hold breaks, if discipline fails, a tide follows. Everything the order kept at bay will flood through breach like dam burst." Her words carried weight of revelation that made rational thought recoil from implications too terrible for mortal mind to fully process. The same force preserving Cadian discipline also served as barrier against Imperium horrors, pressing constantly against reality's boundaries. The dead stood guard not merely against physical enemies, but against chaos itself, their eternal vigil maintaining bulwark protecting entire sectors from forces seeking to unmake order and impose primordial anarchy upon structured universe. Environmental pressure rose with each passing moment, atmospheric readings climbing despite absence of external sources accounting for increase. Ash fell heavier through recycled air, gray particles moving with purpose despite lack of atmospheric currents to carry them. The motes struck hot metal surfaces with sound like rainfall, hissing as they made contact with surfaces too warm for moisture formation. Each flake seemed to know its place in formation, arranging itself with geometric precision, speaking of order imposed through will rather than natural law. My narration grew clipped and ritualistic as proximity to power beyond mortal comprehension threatened to overwhelm consciousness, with implications too vast for individual mind to process. Words emerged with parade ground precision, syllables shaped by training carved deeper than conscious thought. The clinical tone served as anchor against tide of panic, threatening to dissolve rational thought into gibbering terror. Liturgical structure providing framework supporting weight of revelation without complete psychological collapse. Environmental effects deepened as the litany's influence spread through station systems. Frost crystals bloomed in rosettes, shifting from 6 points to 8 to 13 with crystalline precision. Each formation speaking of mathematics imposed through will rather than natural law. Condensation beaded on weapon housings despite insufficient humidity, droplets arranging themselves in straight lines as if ordered by invisible drill sergeants demanding perfection even from water vapor. Comms. Contact report. Iron Warriors boarding signatures detected. Siege breacher pattern. 4th Grand Company tactical markers. Xerion transmitted through channels struggling against temporal distortion. The enemy approached with discipline rivaling our own. Order twisted to serve purposes antithetical to everything Imperial military tradition represented. Their very existence amplified resonance horror. What happened when Cadian discipline met its dark reflection, when order faced order in collision that could shatter reality itself. The concept of Iron Warriors arriving transformed abstract threat into immediate tactical nightmare. These were not mere chaos cultists or demon-touched madmen, but space marines who understood discipline as weapon, who had perverted loyalty into tool-serving purposes transcending individual ambition to serve entropy itself. Their approach through station corridors carried harmonics, answering the same drum beating through Blackstone matrix, creating interference patterns making reality ripple like heat haze over burning cities. The deck thundered beneath our feet as coordinated movement approached with mechanical precision, boots striking metal in synchronized cadence, speaking of centuries spent perfecting art of organized violence. Corridors began reshaping themselves to accommodate forces demanding geometric perfection from chaos and disorder. Blast doors irising shut, then opening into perfect drill squares, as architecture obeyed Kant, transcending mere structural engineering to impose will upon matter itself. The station was preparing for another stand, another performance, aligning its very structure to martial imperative that had defined its inhabitants. Walls unrolled banners that were not there, frost revealing saints for heartbeat before refreezing as geometric flowers. In muffled thunder, the colonel lifted his mechanical head as if listening to frequency only the dead could hear. Vox channels flooded with alien voice-barking commands in corrupted Gothic, authority borrowed from sources older than Imperium, yet twisted to serve masters understanding discipline's true potential. The transmission carried overtones making bones ache with sympathetic vibration, frequencies bypassing conscious thought to speak directly to neural pathways governing obedience and motor control. "Stand to, little Cadia," the voice commanded through speakers that should have been dead. Each syllable delivered with ceremonial precision, making reality lean forward in anticipation. Your vigil ends. Your discipline serves new masters. The song continues, but the singer changes. Iron within, iron without, iron eternal. The words carried weight of accumulated authority, power flowing through channels carved by millennia of service to gods demanding perfection through suffering. These Iron Warriors understood what we were only beginning to comprehend. That discipline was not mere tool, but fundamental force reshaping reality through pure application of organized will. They came not as conquerors, but as inheritors, claiming birthright transcending planetary origin to encompass universal principles of order and obedience. 28 minutes until extraction. The station's corridors rang with sound of two armies forming ranks, one dead but disciplined, the other alive but corrupted. Between them stood the Blackstone shard that had transformed duty into physics and order into natural law. Reality held its breath around collision that would determine whether discipline served emperor or darker masters understanding its true potential. The parade master's Vox grill hummed with anticipation as forces converged on sanctum that had become nexus for power beyond mortal comprehension. Through temporal distortion and gathering darkness, I prepared to speak words that would either save us or damn us to eternal service, in armies knowing no retreat, no surrender, no end to long watch against entropy itself. They came in segmented ranks with the confidence of craftsmen arriving to work, servo motors purring like content predators as power armor adjusted to accommodate movements calculated for maximum intimidation and tactical efficiency. Iron Warriors entered the drill square through breaches bright with new heat, their footfalls landing in lockstep to the drum already beating through the Hulk's heart. Hazard stripes slashed across their ceramite plating like blasphemous parade sashes, yellow and black chevrons arranged with geometric precision that transformed safety warnings into heraldic displays proclaiming allegiance to principles of order perverted beyond recognition. They were not a charge, but an inspection. Helms turning in synchronized arcs, chain axes slung at standardized angles, bolters held with the kind of care only zealots reserve for their relics. The Hulk responded to their presence by reshaping itself in ways that violated architectural logic while serving tactical necessity, machine spirit obeying imperatives embedded deeper than conscious programming. Balconies slid from hidden recesses like review stands extending for parade inspection, rails straightening to regulation height with mechanical precision that spoke of decades spent perfecting military ceremony. Deck plates snapped into new configurations, marking precise intervals for parade movements, the hexagonal stones rearranging themselves, with audible clicks and hisses that created killing zones designed with mathematical precision. Stairwells sealed with pneumatic finality then reappeared meters to the left as though the bastion wished to correct its own posture for optimal fields of fire. The parade master's Vox grill hummed with renewed purpose as it turned toward me, optical sensors focusing with mechanical precision that made authority flow through my bloodline like current through copper wire. Through brass mesh that had never known moisture, commands emerged carrying overtones that bypassed conscious thought to speak directly to neural pathways governing obedience and motor control. I felt the words hammer up my spine and out through my lips without conscious volition. Ghost ranks, firing positions. First rank, kneel. Second, step back half, fire by section. Throughout the station, headless guardsmen responded with movements that violated every law governing flesh and bone, their boots scraping against deck plates in synchronized harmony as they formed firing lines along balconies and elevated positions. The dead materialized in shimmer and shadow, not fully corporeal but dense enough to hold weapons that existed purely through accumulated memory and disciplined will. Phantom las rifles took shape in hands that should not have possessed strength to grip them, muzzles leveling in lines that didn't end where the eye stopped seeing. Micro-clashes bloomed like signal flares across the square as opposing forces engaged in combat that defied conventional understanding of physics and chronometry. Las volleys from ghost weapons met bolter rounds fired by iron warriors in slow-motion pockets generated by temporal distortion, energy beams hanging in rarefied air like red threads, while explosive shells crawled through space at fractions of normal velocity. Bolter reports stretched into organ notes, tracer spirals hanging in arcs that twisted lazily through thin atmosphere, while casings pinged off deck plates a beat late, each impact ringing in perfect 8-8-13 rhythm. Sister Cordelia's null field carved lanes through the temporal morass, creating eddies where time normalized and allowed limited movement through zones where seconds stretched into minutes. Bodies lurched between different temporal speeds, with movements that made sinew creak audibly under stress, joints straining as flesh attempted to accommodate competing authorities governing passage of time itself. One iron warrior stepped into her wake and suddenly ate his own forward momentum, knee overextending with ugly pop before the hold reclaimed him and set his leg like plaster cast in devotional pose. Private Valerius moved through temporal distortion like dancer navigating music only she could hear, her breathing synchronized to rhythm that existed below conscious perception despite environmental seals that should have regulated respiratory function automatically. Blood still wept from cauterized wound inflicted by phantom las fire, yet she maintained formation with discipline that transcended flesh and bone to operate through mechanisms carved by evolution itself. When gravity went light beneath her boots, I dragged step across her name through gritted teeth, and the deck grabbed her soles as if embarrassed at its lapse. Magos Logistor Zerion worked with desperate efficiency behind the reliquary's lattice, mechadendrites moving with surgical precision despite environmental chaos as fiber optic cables threaded through blessed copper conduits toward the Blackstone Shard. Through Vox channels crackling with interference, his synthesized voice delivered analysis, wrapped in technical terminology that carried weight of revelation. Sever the manifold, or all of this becomes theirs. Removal might collapse the cant and resume normal chronometry. Risk, stored temporal energy discharged as kinetic force. Alternative, gift the enemy choir that sings reality into formation. The tactical crisis crystallized with brutal clarity. Fight siege in haunted space where time itself served as weapon, or sever the anchor-binding station to reality and risk unleashing forces that had been held at bay through pure application of disciplined will. Either option carried implications spanning sectors and millennia, consequences that would echo through crusades yet to be fought by soldiers yet to be born. I gave orders that tasted like ashes coating my tongue, watching friends move like puppets to save each other while authority flowed through me in ways that violated everything I understood about individual autonomy and free will. Kasrkin advance by fire and movement. Sister provide null field support. Check fire through her wake. Third file, load and present. The words emerged with parade ground precision despite horror at watching human beings reduced to components in machine designed for eternal warfare. Environmental chaos escalated as competing authorities clashed in ways that made reality itself scream in protest. Gravity fluctuated with the drum beating through Blackstone matrix, creating pockets where debris fell upward while bodies pressed against deck plates with crushing force that left boot prints in adamantium. Metal screamed as it bent to accommodate geometric perfection demanded by cant that transformed architecture into weapon, bulkheads reshaping themselves into angles that hurt to observe directly, yet drew the eye with mathematical beauty that suggested meaning beyond mere physics. The unnamed Inquisitor watched Iron Warriors advance with hunger that transcended mere tactical interest, his gaze reflecting calculations spanning sectors as he contemplated weapons that could transform human will into adamantium chains. We hold continents with this, he breathed through lips trembling with anticipation, and I wanted to strike him for finding doctrine in graveyard of everything that made us human. Telemetry. Warp surge estimated time of arrival 41 minutes. Zerion. Reported through channels struggling against temporal distortion and Imperium interference. The chronometer crawled along my retinal display, numbers shifting in ways that made nausea clench my stomach like fist as reality became elastic, stretching and contracting in response to commands that carried authority older than civilization itself. Iron Warriors waded through syrup of distorted time with methodical malice, servo pistons cycling in stuttering micro-steps that let them place every footfall exactly where maximum damage could be achieved. Their advance spoke of centuries spent perfecting art of organized violence, discipline that mirrored our own yet served purposes, antithetical to everything imperial military tradition represented. Through their Vox grills, corrupted Gothic emerged in clipped parade patter. Stand to, little Cadia. Your vigil ends. The song continues, but the singer changes. Zerion completed bypass installation with mechanical precision that spoke of interface between flesh and blessed machinery, perfected through decades of service, his movements calculated to minimize disruption to systems maintaining station integrity. Through VoxLink, his synthesized voice carried weight of decision that would determine fate of everyone aboard. Extraction sequence initiated, counting to 8. Cable cutter engaged on mark. He planted mag splay on lattice and began to count with metronomic precision that cut through environmental chaos like blade through flesh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On 8, He drove the cable cutter into manifold like priest knifing sacrificial knot, blessed adamantium parting fiber optic conduits in shower of sparks that fell like votive stars before arranging themselves in perfect ranks across deck plates. The Blackstone sang with voice that bypassed hearing to resonate directly in bone and marrow, alien mathematics calculating trajectories stretching across sectors as reality rippled in response to severance of connections, binding order to physics itself. The note was blade you could only feel by bleeding along it, hymn that turned skeleton into resonating chamber for songs older than civilization and more patient than entropy itself. Throughout the station, frozen last light began to move with predatory hunger, energy beams bending midair with impossible grace as targeting systems recalibrated for maximum psychological impact. Beams that had been red and straight bowed as if gravity had become whispering drill instructor with gloved hand on their shoulders, angling away from iron warriors to converge on single point with mathematical precision that spoke of forces beyond mortal comprehension. Every beam pointed directly at my chest, red threads weaving through space to form targeting matrix that existed purely to mark me as focal point for authority that had survived death through sheer force of accumulated will. The light carried heat that scorched ceramite despite having no source, energy that existed through disciplined obedience alone. Reality held its breath around moment that would determine whether discipline served emperor or darker masters who understood its true potential. The parade master's grill clicked with harmonics braiding through my pulse, trying to pull count from my tongue to correct what the magos had dared. My mouth flooded with iron and numbers, 8, 8, 13, while targeting matrix tightened around my chest like noose woven from light itself. Through temporal distortion and gathering darkness, I felt choice hilt deep in my tongue, authority waiting for word that would either save us or damn us to eternal service in armies that knew no retreat, no surrender, no end to long watch against entropy itself. 33 minutes until extraction. The Blackstone's severed song reached crescendo that made deck plates ring like bells, each note carrying weight of accumulated duty spanning millennia. In corridors beyond the sanctum, I heard sound of two armies forming ranks, one dead but disciplined, the other alive but corrupted, while reality prepared to learn what orders could survive the death of those who issued them. The Blackstone screamed through frequencies that bypassed hearing to carve directly into bone and marrow, alien mathematics calculating trajectories that spanned sectors as Xerion's cable cutter severed the primary manifold. The hold cant, no longer perfectly channeled through blessed copper and sacred geometry, misfired catastrophically like artillery piece with cracked barrel, the imperative raging outward with force that rewrote fundamental laws governing passage of time and motion through space. Panic seized my throat with iron fingers, and instinct older than reason forced parade ground authority through lips that no longer fully belonged to me. "Stand fast," I bellowed, the command ripping from my chest with violence that made reality buckle in submission. The words detonated space-time into crystalline obedience, creating cone of temporal distortion 60 meters across with mathematical precision that spoke of forces beyond mortal comprehension. Bolter shells fired moments earlier by iron warriors hung trembling in mid-flight, like insects trapped in amber, their gyros spinning in agonizingly slow motion, while explosive charges froze mid-detonation. Vapor cones bloomed from muzzle brakes and stayed, expanding into perfect geometric flowers that hurt to observe directly, yet drew the eye with mathematical beauty, suggesting meaning beyond mere ballistics. Each projectile vibrated with potential energy-seeking release, micro-oscillations creating harmonics that resonated through skeleton with frequencies existing below conscious perception. Iron warriors caught in the effect stood like statues carved from ceramite and contempt, their snarls vibrating on their teeth with subsonic frequency that made my skull ache with sympathetic resonance. Servo motors whined under stress as power armor attempted to accommodate movements frozen mid-execution, hydraulic systems straining against temporal distortion that held flesh and machinery in positions defying natural law. Their eyes remained aware behind helmet lenses, consciousness trapped in bodies that had become monuments to their own malevolence, hate rising in viscous ripples through amber time. Flesh began calcifying in marching postures as the imperative rewrote biological processes to serve parade ground precision, muscle fibers hardening into ceremonial rigidity that transformed living tissue into devotional sculpture. Private Valerius stood at perfect attention despite cauterized, wound-weeping blood through armor seals, her eyes glazing as crystalline tears formed with geometric precision that spoke of moisture organizing itself according to mathematical principles rather than emotional response. The tears fell upward in perfect formation, each droplet maintaining regulation spacing as they drifted toward ceiling that had become floor in space where gravity served discipline rather than planetary mass. Sister Cordelia waded through the frozen zone with movements that left wake lines of normal time trailing behind her like contrails in crystalline air, her blessed emptiness carving channels through temporal morass that allowed limited movement despite forces seeking to conscript reality itself to eternal parade. The null field created eddies where seconds resumed normal passage, pockets of chronological sanity that healed behind her with reluctant precision as the hold reasserted authority over space-time momentarily freed from its embrace. She moved toward me with unnatural grace, each step deliberate push against resistance of reality itself. The revelation struck with brutal clarity as I watched her progress. The imperative wasn't moral command, but engine rewriting friction and inertia at quantum level, transforming physical laws into parade regulations that demanded obedience from particles and forces that had never known military service. Discipline had become physics, duty had become natural law, authority flowing through channels predating consciousness to operate through mechanisms carved by evolution itself. The hold cant understood physics of obedience better than any living mind, asserting will not just on conscious beings but on matter itself. Body horror peaked as ligaments threaded taut like parade cords beneath skin, acquiring texture of ceremonial leather, bones aligning according to geometry demanded by drum beating through Blackstone matrix. I heard faint crackling of skeletal adjustment, microscopic whispers of tissue forced into unnatural perfection as the 8-8-13 cadence literally reshaped anatomy. My own joints ached with sympathetic vibration, fingers feeling subtle pressure to conform, to lock into posture of eternal vigilance that transcended individual comfort to serve collective purpose. The parade master's vox grill hissed, with authority carrying overtones of machine spirits in distress, brass mesh vibrating with frequencies bypassing hearing to resonate in neural pathways governing obedience. Through synthetic voice crackling with interference, commands emerged wrapped in revelation, sacrifice required for release. Final salute of Commander of Blood to dismiss the line. Authority must be spent to break authority. Its optical sensors focused on me with mechanical precision, brass lenses calculating trajectories spanning millennia as it recognized what I was beginning to comprehend. Power flowing through my bloodline carried price measured in flesh and bone. The Inquisitor's voice emerged through fractured comm channels, words hissing with static as he argued for applications, transcending immediate tactical concerns. Weaponize, don't waste it, he commanded through lips moving with difficulty against temporal distortion. Transform human will into adamantium chains, perfect tool for eternal crusade. His eyes reflected calculations spanning sectors as he contemplated armies that would march until heat death of universe, regiments bound by imperatives transcending flesh to operate through mechanisms older than civilization. Environmental extremes escalated as competing authorities clashed, humidity spiking beyond measurement before vanishing completely, moisture flash freezing into geometric crystals, falling like devotional snow across surfaces, too warm for ice formation. Heat bled into void through mechanisms violating thermodynamics, while serving tactical necessity, temperature gradients reversing as energy flowed from cold to hot, in defiance of entropy itself. Telemetry, atmospheric pressure inverting, variance readings beyond sensor parameters. Xerion reported through channels struggling against interference. Numbers crawled along my retinal display, in ways making nausea clench my stomach. Measurements suggesting reality had become elastic, stretching and contracting in response to commands, carrying authority older than physics itself. I looked down to discover the colonel's crimson sash looped around my neck without memory of movement, ceremonial silk migrating from prayer plinth to throat through mechanisms bypassing conscious observation. The fabric felt warm against skin despite environmental cold, pulsing with rhythm matching my thundering heart, while knot tightened with each beat in countdown, speaking of authority demanding payment for services rendered. The sash counted with patient malevolence: 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. On 13, the knot would complete its work, authority claiming price in flesh while transforming individual will into component in machine designed for eternal warfare. 21 minutes until extraction. Reality held its breath around collision that would determine whether discipline served Emperor or darker masters understanding its true potential. The knot reached 12 and paused, silk trembling with anticipation as forces beyond mortal comprehension prepared to claim price measured in blood and duty. On 13, the circle would close through willing surrender, authority spending itself to break authority in paradox that might save us or damn us to eternal service in armies knowing no retreat from duty's demands. The crimson sash reached 12 beats and trembled against my throat like a living rosary counting down to martyrdom, silk fibers pulsing with authority that demanded payment measured in flesh and accumulated duty. The Inquisitor raised his bolt pistol with movements made deliberate by temporal distortion, the weapon's machine spirit struggling to maintain targeting lock through air thick as syrup with crystallized time. His voice emerged with liturgical weight that brooked no argument despite environmental chaos, threatening to tear reality apart at fundamental seams. Imperial necessity, he declared through lips moving with difficulty against forces seeking to conscript even speech to parade ground precision. This power serves the Golden Throne or it serves nothing. I will not permit waste of resources that could bind entire crusades to unbreakable service. The bolt pistol's muzzle swept across my team with mechanical precision, calculating trajectories that spanned sectors and millennia as he contemplated weapons capable of transforming human will into adamantium chains, binding reality to imperial purpose. Sister Cordelia bled from ears despite environmental seals, crimson droplets falling upward in perfect formation as her blessed emptiness struggled against infection, spreading through channels deeper than psychic influence. Through rapid sign language that cut temporal distortion like blade through flesh, she communicated revelation wrapped in warning. 2 fingers pressed together, then broken apart. Shutting down the shard would free trapped souls, but release warp pressure held at bay through centuries of disciplined will. Her hands formed a circle, then clenched into fists. Leaving it operational would bind generations to unending last stand transcending death itself. I tasted ash and old prayers coating my tongue as memories surfaced unbidden from childhood training grounds where Cadia's twin suns set like dying eyes over formations of boys, learning to become walls against darkness. My mother's voice whispered through decades of accumulated duty, her hands gentle on my shoulders as she corrected posture that would one day hold formation against impossible odds. Kasser comes first, not the building, not the people, but what they stand for. The line must hold, but the line must also know when its watch is done. In the micro-rituals binding my squad together, Private Valerius counting off under her breath in syncopated rhythm that broke the pervasive 8813, Kasserkin's safeties snapping with mechanical precision, Sister Cordelia's rosary clicking to cadences older than conscious thought. I heard possibility threading between surrender and eternal servitude. The cant demanded completion, but completion need not mean continuation. Change the word, invert the right, transform hold into something honoring duty, while acknowledging its natural end. Dismiss, I whispered through lips trembling with potential energy, the word emerging like prayer torn from throat, no longer fully belonging to me. Funerary cadence. Lay the hold to rest with honors earned through blood and sacrifice. Let the dead stand down with dignity intact. The concept crystallized with brutal clarity, not breaking the cant but completing it, giving eternal vigil permission to end through ceremony acknowledging service rendered and duty fulfilled. Magos Logistor Zerion's mechadendrites arced with renewed purpose as he processed data streams flowing from Blackstone Matrix, synthesized voice muttering Binharic inversion protocols, weaving machine language through human speech with surgical precision. Temporal reversal cascade initiated through ceremonial completion, he whispered through Vox channels crackling with interference. Phase invert the imperative matrix, counter frequency harmonics mapped against motor cortex rails. Honor the service, dismiss the servants through sacred mathematics. Sister Cordelia offered null-anchored sanctum despite blood weeping from nose and ears. Blessed emptiness creating pocket of chronological stability where ceremony could unfold without interference from forces seeking to conscript reality to eternal parade. Her gauntleted hands moved in ritual patterns, older than the Imperium, gestures blending ecclesiarchal benedictions with tactical signals in hybrid communication speaking to flesh and spirit with equal authority. We prepared ceremony blending elements spanning millennia, Cadian drill calls carrying weight of accumulated duty, Mechanicus ordinances transforming technical procedure into devotional act, litanies of passing acknowledging service while granting permission to rest. Each element would build upon others to create harmonic resonance capable of completing the cant rather than shattering it through brute force. Iron warriors caught in temporal distortion leveraged themselves into shooting positions with movements speaking of centuries perfecting organized violence, servo motors whining under stress as they fought crystallized time through pure application of disciplined malevolence. Their advance proceeded with mechanical precision despite environmental chaos, each micro-movement calculated for maximum tactical advantage when normal chronometry resumed. Body horror intensified as ceremony preparation triggered deeper changes in flesh and bone. My skin hardened to ceramite texture, while eyes began reflecting tactical displays existing purely through accumulated memory and disciplined will. Voices harmonized involuntarily, words emerging in pitch-perfect unison despite conscious effort to maintain individual identity against forces seeking to transform human beings into components in machines designed for eternal warfare. Old scars rose into sharp chevrons, speaking of rank earned through suffering, ligaments threading taut like parade cords beneath epidermis, acquiring ceremonial texture. Telemetry, warp surge estimated time of arrival, 19 minutes. Zerion reported through channels struggling against Imperium interference. Numbers crawled along my retinal display, shifting in ways making nausea clench my stomach as reality became elastic, stretching and contracting in response to commands carrying authority older than civilization itself. We began with movements feeling ancient as stone, yet precise as clockwork, each gesture calculated to honor duty while acknowledging natural completion. "By files from the right," I called, voice carrying parade ground authority wrapped in liturgical reverence. "Present arms for final salute." "On my word," dismissed the line. Drill calls emerged from throats shaped by childhood training, while Mechanicus Binharik wove through human speech with mathematical precision, litanies of passing, transforming tactical procedure into devotional act, acknowledging sacrifice accepted and service rendered. The Inquisitor's bolt pistol barked with authority, shattering ceremonial silence, the round striking a votive candle and exploding blessed wax, across surfaces ringing like bells under impact. Through the echo, his voice emerged with weight carrying implications, spanning crusades. No dismissal, only command. This power serves the Golden Throne, or it serves nothing. Sentiment has no place in the Emperor's service. The weapon pivoted with mechanical precision, targeting Sister Cordelia's helm with movements calculated for maximum psychological impact. The bolt shell struck blessed ceramite and detonated inside her null field, the explosion tearing white wound in reality as her blessed emptiness collapsed like punctured void shield. Her body crumpled against reliquary supports, servo motors sparking from hydrostatic shock, while blood misted through ruptured seals, crimson droplets falling in perfect formation as temporal distortion reclaimed sanctum with predatory hunger. The Blackstone shard flared like dead star waking from eternal slumber, alien mathematics calculating trajectories spanning sectors as power flowed through channels no longer dampened by null field suppression. Light that was not light carved through crystallized air with surgical precision, each beam carrying authority bypassing conscious thought to speak directly to neural pathways governing obedience and motor control. The cant reasserted itself with renewed vigor, discipline becoming physics, while duty transformed into natural law binding reality to parade ground precision. The crimson sash completed its 13th beat and began tightening with authority transcending flesh and bone, silk fibers carrying current transforming individual will into component in machine designed for eternal warfare. Around us, the station prepared for final performance, architecture reshaping itself to accommodate forces demanding geometric perfection from chaos and disorder, while iron warriors surged forward through collapsing temporal barriers, their corrupted Gothic chants rising in triumphant counterpoint to the Blackstone's renewed song. 18 minutes until extraction. The ceremony lay shattered like broken glass across sanctum floor, hope of peaceful resolution dissolving into chaos as competing authorities clashed in ways making reality itself scream in protest. The Inquisitor's eyes reflected calculations spanning millennia as he contemplated weapons binding entire crusades to unbreakable service, while the shard sang with voice bypassing hearing to resonate directly in bone and marrow, with frequencies older than civilization and more patient than entropy itself. Reality held its breath around collision, determining whether discipline served Emperor or darker masters understanding its true potential, while I felt the weight of command settling on shoulders like ceremonial sash woven from live wire, each thread carrying current that would either save us or damn us to eternal service, in armies knowing no retreat, no surrender, no end to the long watch against entropy itself. Chaos erupted as ceremony and warfare converged in collision that shattered the sanctum's ordered geometry, reality screaming through frequencies that bypassed hearing to carve directly into bone and marrow. The sash at my throat gave 13 a hungry tug, silk fibers counting down to martyrdom while I raised my voice to parade bark and broke the drum that owned us. On my word, by files from the right, 7, 7, 11, the numbers fell like thrown stones against crystalline time, jagged counts striking deck plates at wrong angles with deliberate discord that made phantom heels hesitate in their eternal march. The pattern fractured with audible snap, mathematical precision shattering like glass under artillery bombardment. Where my voice landed on 7, frost flowers melted into geometric puddles that refused to refreeze despite environmental cold. On 11, gravity lurched sideways with mechanical confusion, making debris fall in directions that violated planetary physics, while serving tactical necessity born of desperation wrapped in parade ground authority. Magos Logistor Zerion seized the opening with machine grace, mechadendrites braiding counterpoint as he fed the shard reversed phase harmonics, calculated to disrupt rather than enhance its alien mathematics. Binharik poured from his vox grill in harsh triplets, cold water chant weaving through human speech. Phase inversion initiated. Counter harmonic set to 7.0 and 11.0 Hz. Hold is function. Functions can be negated through sacred mathematics, serving dissolution. The reliquary's veins pulsed out of sync, black light turning gray, then knife-edge black again as competing authorities clashed within. Crystalline matrix designed to bind reality to parade ground precision. Sparks feathered from cable cutters and arranged themselves in drilled rows across deck plates, glowing embers standing at attention until they cooled into perfect formations that spoke of order imposed even in destruction. Sister Cordelia pushed up on shaking elbows, helmet cracked and blessing blood stenciling scripture across her gorget where hydrostatic shock had ruptured seals. Her null field, punched through by the Inquisitor's round, still clung to her like broken winter, blessed emptiness creating eddies and temporal distortion. She crawled across prayer plinth with movements speaking of faith, maintained unto death and beyond, fingers leaving crescents in rhyme as she pressed scarred brow against Blackstone's surface. The howl dimmed like embarrassed predator, alien mathematics struggling against proximity to void that refused conscription. Dismiss, she gasped through vox grill crackling with static, the word emerging as steam that organized itself into geometric patterns before dissipating into chaos. Her null created wake lines through frozen time, channels where seconds resumed normal passage, despite forces seeking to conscript chronometry itself to eternal parade. The parade master convulsed with mechanical fury, vox grill shrieking in modulated tones that skipped between Colonel's blessing and machine denial. By files, bless, errors, stand to, dismissed, not dismissed, hold, hold, hold. Brass lenses ratcheted with confusion as programming designed to maintain discipline encountered commands calculated to grant permission for rest earned through blood and sacrifice. Sensor tubes wept cold incense that beaded into straight lines before shattering into glitter like frozen breath. The entity split by heresy of offbeats. Environmental eruption escalated into sacrament as competing forces reshaped reality through pure application of organized will. Ash gales spiraled inward despite absence of atmospheric currents, gray motes marching in eddies that honored unseen color sergeants, while whistling through cracks that materialized to accommodate their passage. Frost melted and refroze in geometric flowers across every surface, 6-point rosettes trying to become 8s and failing, then blooming into 11s that looked wrong to the eye the way crooked crosses violated sacred geometry. Air tasted of copper and burned prayers, metallic tang coating tongue while environmental processors struggled against forces transforming chemistry through ceremonial authority. Each breath carried char of old parchment and sanctified oil, flavors blending into sacrament that made every syllable feel anointed with accumulated duty spanning millennia. I felt thousands of boots stamping cadence inside my ribs, phantom regiment marching through skeleton transformed into resonating chamber for songs older than civilization. The beat tried to slide back to familiar 8-8-13, muscle, memory fighting conscious rebellion. I gave it paved trench to fall into and made it miss. Right, 2, 3, 7, change step, 11, check. Words ripped at throat until blood salted my mouth, each syllable a conscious act of defiance against mathematics that had conscripted reality itself. Iron warriors waded shoulder deep into stiffened air with sermon-like precision, hazard stripes bright as blasphemy while helm lenses burned with furnace calm that hated like arithmetic. One swung chainaxe through sheet of frozen light, pooled along nave like drapery. Blessed adamantium bit and light snapped like silk, curling in luminous ribbons that smoked with struck flint scent. Bolter muzzles sought targets in slow arcs, while time staggered, shrugged, and tried to run again. Comms, nursery calls detected, origin Cadian Habscola archives, alignment 711 cadence, flickered across my display. For heartbeat I heard old courtyard songs. Left, little stones, mind the crack, humming along my off-count. Mothers' voices braided into Zerion's machine hiss, and my failing bark, cultural memory flowing through channels carved by evolution to ensure group survival, even when individual members faced annihilation. The Inquisitor, blood running from ear like wax from candle, reached for reliquary's feed as if grasping scepter abandoned by careless king. He stabbed Rosette into data throat and screamed, not from pain but possession, as medallion drank order signal like sacrament wine. Filigree glowed along thorns while augmetics clenched around laugh that didn't belong to him. Anchor mobile, he crooned through voice doubled by alien harmonics. I bear the word. Radius waves rippled from chest in neat rings, making headless guardsmen at balconies snap to tighter dress, as if inspected. Sister Cordelia screamed when wave struck her compromised null field, sound having no pitch and all pitches simultaneously. It made ash fall flat, then leap into perfect files, reality rippling like water, disturbed by stones cast from impossible heights. She smashed forehead harder against Blackstone, teeth cutting lip, while blessed emptiness struggled against infection spreading through channels deeper than psychic influence. Keep counting, she said through absence with edges. I'll drink what I can. I counted until numbers lost meaning and became shapes carved from necessity rather than mathematics. 7, 11, step, counter, check. By sections, 7, refuse the flank, 11. The dead answered with rifles gaining weight in insubstantial hands, last lights smoldering along choir rails to stitch stuttering hem across iron warriors' plates. He grunted and took hits like scripture, pressing forward into our bad music with patience of rock worn smooth by centuries of organized violence. Zerion's Binharik rose to harsh descant, machine gospel against Shard's alien song. Invert, invert, invert. Telemetry scrolled across my display. Subharmonic migration detected. Primary bias drifting to 7.0 Hz. Secondary establishing at 11.0. The Magos's voice carried awe and horror in equal measure as reality bent to accommodate mathematics serving dissolution rather than formation. gravity changed its mind twice in single sentence, making us light then heavy before riding into skew that tilted every horizon. Balconies slid half-meter to perfect arcs of fire, while rails corrected to regulation height, Hulk judging itself and making amends with mechanical precision. Iron Warrior stepped into Sister's null slipstream, found mass returned, and stumbled just enough for Valerius's ghost-anchored shot to kiss intake vents. Smoke rolled, he snarled. Time grabbed his jaw and shook sound into long brass moan. My squad harmonized to off-count like wounded trying to breathe with machines, safeties snapping on wrong beats, mine not shards, each wrongness cracking motif like ice thawing under black sun. Ceremonial salute, I barked with tone low as funeral drum. By files for the fallen 7-11 rays. La's barrels lifted like forest of candles, terrible and beautiful in their imperfection. The Inquisitor staggered into our formation and split it with authority, bleeding from wounds, inflicted by forces beyond mortal comprehension. No dismissal, he declared. But Rosette spoke with his mouth, while wave from chest ran into Sister's emptiness and came apart into dirty surf lapping at our ankles. Only command. Boots inside my ribs stamped fury while sash jerked toward final knot. I saw a path with clarity born of desperation, not just count against count, but step against step, bridge against bridge. We had cracked the song. To break it, someone had to break themselves to it. Don't march bridge in time, or you'll bring it down. We had become the bridge. Sister Cordelia turned head against stone and found my eye through starburst of cracked plasteel, mouthing barely audible word that carried weight of accumulated sacrifice. Trip. Ash around her lips moved in sevens, reality bending to accommodate final act of defiance against mathematics that had transformed duty into physics. 13 minutes until extraction. I lifted heel against phantom regiment thundering inside chest, feeling ligament twang like parade cord about to snap, and poised weight over wrong beat. First broken step I had ever chosen in life, dedicated to holding formation against impossible odds. The sash completed its revolution around throat, while reality held breath around collision, determining whether discipline served Emperor or darker masters understanding its true potential. The heel went down wrong because I willed it to, a deliberate stumble on flat deck that felt like blasphemy and salvation, braided into single act of conscious rebellion. Training screamed through nerve pathways carved by decades of service, muscle memory demanding correction, but I let my knee buckle and the sash bite deeper while missing the drum by calculated margin. The misstep detonated through the station's heart, with violence that made reality buckle like fabric torn by invisible hands, temporal distortion wavering as mathematical precision encountered discord designed to shatter rather than preserve accumulated order. The bastion faltered like soldier tripping on ceremonial stairs, architecture groaning with mechanical confusion as support structures designed to accommodate perfect geometry encountered chaos, defying computational prediction. Bulkheads shifted with audible protests, hexplate flooring rippling in waves that made walking feel like navigating storm-tossed deck. Rails stuttered, banners of frozen light sagged like disappointed flags, and the grid beneath our boots writhed as surfaces sought new configurations to accommodate forces no longer demanding mathematical perfection from matter-serving parade ground necessity. Ghost battalions rippled through corridors like heat haze over burning cities, phantom ranks wavering between substance and memory as temporal anchor dissolved under assault of deliberate imperfection. Some straightened with parade ground precision, brought spectral rifles to shoulder, and offered the first and last proper salute they had managed since Cadia's sky tour. Fingers that were only memory kissed insubstantial triggers, muzzles lifted toward dead suns, Then the shapes blurred to thin gray like breath on glass and were gone. Others sagged with collective sigh spanning centuries, tendons slackening like cut cables, parade cords unthreading beneath skin as relief so profound it made my chest ache with sympathetic resonance flowed through ranks finally granted permission to rest. The 8-8-13 drum that had colonized our bones collapsed into scattered ticks, like broken metronome clacking in room suddenly too wide for sound. Each component beat sought its own tempo, without central authority maintaining synchronization, phantom footfalls thundering through my ribs, beginning to separate as collective rhythm dissolved into chaos of personal choice rather than imposed order. The sound felt like benediction and blasphemy together, freedom purchased through deliberate violation of everything that made us Cadian. Bones unknit from parade geometry with noises like ice cracking on frozen rivers, joints rotating to natural positions after decades, locked in postures serving ceremonial rather than biological necessity. Throughout the station, some bodies crumbled to ash as temporal anchor dissolved, flesh preserved through disciplined will, finally acknowledging passage of time, held at bay through pure force of accumulated duty. Others slumped for first time in centuries, heads lolling to angles that would have earned correction from drill instructors who had themselves become dust before their students learned to die standing at attention. Iron warriors deprived of rhythmic anchor that had allowed calculated advance through temporal distortion overreached into their own crossfire with movements violating tactical doctrine in ways speaking of dependency on external timing they had not acknowledged. Bolter rounds meant for our position struck ceramite plates of allies moving too fast through air, no longer thick as syrup. Friendly fire blooming in sparks and curses as disciplined advance devolved into chaos of individual initiative rather than collective precision. The parade master wavered like image reflected in disturbed water, brass lenses ratcheting with mechanical confusion as programming designed to maintain discipline encountered systematic violation of every principle it had been constructed to preserve. Through Vox grill crackling with interference, a child's voice emerged beneath command tones, not the colonel's authority, but something younger, more fragile. Do not dismiss us. We have held so long, the line is all we are. Without formation, we are nothing. Magos Logistor Zerion's sensor dendrites wrote frantic sigils through crystalline air, while Binharik spilled like beads from snapped cord. Lattice integrity failing, he intoned through channels struggling against Imperium interference. Primary truss fracture at nodes delta, zeta, iota. Sacred mathematics dissolving into chaos equations, serving entropy rather than order. I wept without knowing if tears came from grief for duty abandoned or shards sweating through me, moisture beading on cheeks despite environmental seals. Each droplet fell in formation despite my deliberate discord, crystalline tears arranging themselves with geometric precision, speaking of forces still seeking to impose order even as their foundation crumbled like sand castles before incoming tide. Environmental collapse accelerated with sickening roar. Walls bled condensation that formed faces of soldiers who had stood their final watch, moisture organizing into features recognizable through decades of service, before streaming away in rivulets, following straight lines despite gravity's confusion. Metal screamed as it unbent from impossible angles, bulkheads resuming configurations, serving structural integrity rather than ceremonial geometry, architecture groaning with relief as it abandoned postures violating engineering principles for sake of maintaining perfect formation. Telemetry warp surge estimated time of arrival 4 minutes, scrolled across my display in numbers crawling like living things, chronometers struggling against temporal distortion, making seconds stretch into hours, then compress into heartbeats, Without pattern or predictability, the command lashed through crystalline air like flayed banner torn by winds of entropy, striking my chest with authority, bypassing conscious thought to speak directly to neural pathways governing obedience carved deeper than individual will. I felt weight of the line pressing against consciousness, not just my squad, but generations of soldiers who had stood their ground against impossible odds, boys who had learned to die standing rather than live kneeling, men who had held formation through planetary annihilation because someone had to maintain watch against forces seeking to unmake order itself. My throat became conduit for authority, flowing through bloodlines carved by generations of service, words queuing behind teeth like ammunition in magazine. The station held its breath around moment, determining whether duty served emperor or darker masters, understanding discipline's true potential. I inhaled ash that tasted of old prayers and burned parchment, opened throat to forces beyond mortal comprehension, and spoke words carrying weight of bloodlines stretching back to Cadia's first settlement. Fall back through me. The command emerged with parade ground authority wrapped in funeral benediction, each syllable calculated to honor duty while acknowledging natural completion of service rendered through blood and sacrifice. Around me, phantom soldiers began to move, not in retreat, but in final parade, passing through my consciousness like infantry through breach, in wall that had held for centuries before finally acknowledging that some battles end not in victory or defeat, but in simple recognition that watch has been maintained long enough. The command tore open a corridor inside me, consciousness expanding to accommodate passage of forces that had waited centuries for permission to complete their final march. As fall back through me left my throat, reality bent inward through my chest, ribs arcing into vaulting while memories, souls, and kinetic residues filed like infantry through breach carved from necessity rather than violence. Agony poured through nerves with surgical precision, sinew ripping along stress lines that had nothing to do with physical force, bone grinding against bone as skeletons struggled to accommodate weight of accumulated service spanning generations rather than single lifetime. I tasted childhood not my own, a boy who died holding position with broken bayonet, prayers whispered under Khazar tables while sky broke into geometric patterns that hurt to observe directly. The shock of final last burst, weight of comrade on shoulder, way a name tastes when you know no one will answer again. Each sensation passed through throat, transformed into gate for authority flowing through bloodlines carved by evolution itself. My mouth became the only portal left on Cadia, consciousness stretched thin as ceremonial banner across framework never designed to bear such weight. Private Valerius moved beneath my voice with mechanical precision, despite cauterized wound-weeping blood through armor seals, her passage feeling like current through copper wire as she stepped through breach opened by authority transcending flesh and bone. When she crossed the threshold, whispered drill counts she kept tucked behind teeth, fluttered out and settled to rest like furled banner. The second Kasserkin touched my gauntlet and left crackle of campfire stolen on, forbidden night between rotations, while third slid past quiet as shadows, his secret fear of breaking step dissolving like frost on warm metal. Sister Cordelia leaned against my shoulder with weight, speaking of faith maintained unto death and beyond, breath emerging as frost prayer through cracked helmet seals, while blessed emptiness created eddies in temporal distortion. Her null field, punched through by inquisitorial bolt round, still clung like broken winter, creating pockets where seconds resumed normal passage despite forces seeking to conscript chronometry itself. "Hold, and then let go," she murmured, words becoming ghosts that shivered in my mouth before moving on. Magos Logistor Zerion followed, bearing jagged lattice sliver cupped like relic while feedback spiderwebbed his optics, machine oil weeping from corners like tired tears. When he brushed my pauldron, I tasted copper and code, while shard fragment thrummed in sympathy with doorway I had become. Through vox channels crackling with interference, Binharic prayers emerged acknowledging mysteries transcending blessed union of flesh and sacred technology. Ghost Cadians flowed in gray river that did not splash because parade boots do not splash. They stepped, saluted for first and final time, then shed bondage that had kept shoulders high past hour of mercy. Their heads bowed in dismissal long overdue, each inclination lifting weight off my spine, even as cumulative procession bowed it lower. Some carried songs, some carried silence, some carried nothing but grim mathematics of fire lanes and arcs of advance, and even those softened and slid away. I felt last white knuckles unclench from ghost last grips, final inspection terror slacken from jaw that had been all teeth for decades. Outside the sanctum, the bastion groaned toward the eye of terror, as void shields guttered like last candles, the eyes light licking edges of rents with lovers' cruelty. Without temporal anchor maintaining impossible geometry, architecture resumed configurations serving natural law rather than ceremonial necessity. Gravity jittered in mean bursts, flinging iron warriors against bulkheads mid-curse, their hazard stripes scraping sparks as discipline found nothing to harmonize with and clawed at steel instead. Colors drained until everything became parade ground gray, while sounds flattened to single thin tone, reality simplifying to essential elements: weight, breath, cold, drum. Comms, shuttle auto-ignition, undock window collapsing, flickered across my visor as we lurched toward bay, amid thunder like city folding itself into suitcase. Doors remembered concept of opening and tried to comply, while stairwells ran short, ladders ran long, same corridor arriving twice before realizing mistake and disappearing under our boots. Sister Cordelia walked within arm's reach, null field sputtering like holy engine drinking last dregs of blessed fuel, smoothing worst turbulence where wake passed. We crossed portico, where Parademaster had once reviewed living men. It stood wavering in archway like heat living in cold places, brass lenses tracking me with child's bewilderment pasted over Colonel's duty. "Do not dismiss us," it said softer, and for heartbeat I saw a boy in borrowed boots, tracing chevrons into dust. Then it flickered, lost beat, and bowed to no one as wind of eye took incense straight from sensor tubes. The unnamed inquisitor was gone, reliquary's feed hanging torn, while socketed throat bore scorched brand shaped like Rosette's thorned halo. On distant deck, lifter sled juddered, then went still. Somewhere beneath it, podlock exhaling with satisfaction. I tasted afterimage of his voice. Only command, then copper snap of my own blood on tongue. Shuttle bay had become slot cut by careful hand, transport crouching on mag feet with doors yawning like uncomplicated mercy. We ran as if drum belonged to us again, iron warriors scrabbling in peripheral hollows, half stuck in wrong gravity. One raised bolter and found even fury needs cadence. Shot went wide, hitting rank of ghosts no longer there. We hit ramp in staggered file, rising with smoothness that insulted ship's spasms. My mouth would not stop. Micro orders leaked in thread, stitching me to threshold. Dress, align, check, eyes front, intervals. Each syllable left bloody prints on teeth, bright marks like inspection failures wiped with glove back, and found again by sergeant who never missed anything. I could feel last stragglers inside, laggards and ashamed, ones who never learned to take compliment. They took their time, and I gave it because time was all any of us had ever really been asking for. Sister Cordelia slumped into harness without closing eyes, breath fogging in exact squares before deciding to become curves. Zerion strapped lattice sliver into cage, improvised from medframe and prayer stand. Harmonic attenuated, he rasped, not null, never null. Comms, undock sequence, 15 seconds, vector drift with intolerance, sang shuttle's machine spirit in near happy monotone. Hook releases thunked like knuckles on door. Through narrowing wedge of bay, I watched Bastion turn best face to eye, way veteran turns good side to pick lens. Not dignity, habit, clamps, blue. We slid free, engines bitten into vacuum like teeth. I still whispered, not knowing whether words were paving stones for last stragglers or snares for first living to follow. Hold, I almost said, because habit was older than bones. Hold, said Farvox instead, voice from distance that felt like tomorrow. Hold position until further orders. We were away, but order had learned how to travel. The shuttle tore free as warp gales struck with malice, born of cosmic patience, our craft screaming through Imperium winds that made hull plates ring like funeral bells. Behind us, the last stand bastion folded with dignity intact, architecture collapsing along invisible creases like parade banner furled in fire, walls bowing with ceremonial precision, even as temporal anchors dissolved into chaos equations serving entropy rather than order. The eye of terror swallowed the spectacle with hungry satisfaction, malevolent radiance casting shadows that moved independently, while the station maintained formation unto its final moment. I filed my report between convulsions of command speech that ripped from throat without conscious volition, each word a struggle against cant, still threading nerves like copper wire conducting authority I could not discharge. Corporal Merrick Voss, Inquisitorial Retrieval Team Moors 13, reporting extraction with extreme prejudice, emerged through lips moving to rhythms carved deeper than individual will. Micro-orders leaked between phrases like blood from bitten tongue. Dress, align, check intervals. Each syllable left bloody prints on teeth while I struggled to maintain coherent thought against tide of accumulated duty pressing for expression. Magos Logistor Zerion transmitted coordinates through channels crackling with Imperium interference, his synthesized voice carrying weight of recommendation that would echo through sector command for decades. Permanent interdiction advised. Cyclonic torpedo insufficient. Temporal contamination requires quarantine at stellar level. Sacred mathematics suggest contagion vector through Cadian bloodlines, cultural transmission mechanisms transcending biological inheritance. Numbers followed like litanies, 8s and 13s repeating until awe-specks flickered with sympathetic resonance. Sister Cordelia lay pale against acceleration couch, helmet cracked, lips moving in silent dismissal for those who had not escaped the Bastion's final ceremony. Her null field sputtered like holy engine drinking last dregs of blessed fuel, while she whispered litanies acknowledging service rendered and permission granted for eternal rest. Blood seeped through fractured seals, crimson droplets falling in perfect formation despite blessed emptiness, struggling against infection spreading through channels deeper than psychic influence. Auspec's sweep revealed life pod vector arcing away from collapse zone, trajectory calculated for maximum stealth while maintaining course toward fleet assets. Enhanced resolution showed Blackstone sliver bound within Rosette's thorned halo, portable hold glowing with authority that could transform human will into adamantium chains. The unnamed Inquisitor had claimed his prize, carrying weapon toward applications spanning crusades and millennia. Sector-wide chatter crackled through Vox channels as contamination spread through mechanisms defying conventional understanding. Regiments reported spontaneous nighttime formations, soldiers rising from sleep to dress ranks by instinct, boots scraping against barracks floors in synchronized harmony. Hive children snapped to attention at whistles only they could hear, small bodies arranging with geometric precision that made parents weep with inexplicable terror. Manufactoria conveyors aligned to parade speed despite efficiency protocols, production lines reorganizing around ceremonial rather than industrial necessity. The motifs echoed through data streams, 8s and 13s appearing in traffic logs, architectural modifications following mathematical patterns that hurt to observe, meal schedules restructuring around cadences, serving accumulated duty rather than nutritional requirements. Even shuttle systems responded, lumen strips brightening in review sequence while medici drips ticked in cohorts of 8, 8, 13. I requested containment edict through channels reserved for threats transcending individual sectors, each word carefully measured against possibility of command speech, contaminating official communications. Authorization quarantined my own voice on burn slip protocols. Data slate locked behind encryption, requiring 3 separate keys to prevent accidental transmission during sleep or reduced consciousness. Fear made hands shake as I contemplated authority flowing through voice that could conscript reality to eternal parade. Body horror lingered despite escape from Bastion's influence, transformation incomplete yet irreversible. My reflection showed traces that would never heal. Skin slightly too smooth where ceremonial scarification had risen beneath epidermis, eyes tracking movement with mechanical precision, speaking of targeting systems calibrated for inspection rather than human observation. When I blinked, motion fell into rhythm serving accumulated discipline rather than biological necessity. Comms, Adeptus Astra Telepathica advises communication silence, Ordo Hereticus reply pending, scrolled across display in characters that seemed to march rather than appear. Telepathic core detected psychic resonance patterns suggesting contagion vector through Vox transmission, recommending total blackout until contamination could be assessed by authorities understanding forces beyond conventional comprehension. The reply arrived through channels crackling with interference spanning light years, transmission fragmented by forces seeking to prevent certain words from reaching intended recipients. Most dissolved into static that sounded like parade drums, but single sentence emerged with crystalline clarity that made bones ache with recognition. Hold position until further orders. The command struck like physical blow, compelling obedience through mechanisms older than thought. Around me, surviving team members straightened despite injuries and exhaustion, bodies responding to authority flowing through channels carved by generations of service. Even Sister Cordelia's null field rippled as blessed emptiness struggled against infection, bypassing conscious thought to speak directly to motor control pathways. Through viewports, stars wheeled in formations, suggesting meaning beyond stellar mechanics, constellations arranging with geometric precision. Speaking of order imposed through will rather than natural law, the cant had escaped temporal prison, spreading through sector communications like virus designed to transform human will into components in machine built for eternal warfare. Containment had failed before beginning. The cant was loose in galaxy, seeking new voices to carry its song across sectors and millennia. Through my throat, authority pressed for expression while I struggled to maintain individual will against forces demanding absolute obedience from reality itself. In distance, I heard regiments forming ranks across 1,000 worlds, discipline learning to travel faster than light itself. The aftermath unfolds in cold light of classified debriefing chamber where truth becomes tactical assessment and horror transforms into contained documentation. I deliver my mission account with clinical precision, each syllable measured against possibility of command speech, contaminating official records while recording servitors scratch brass styluses across parchment. The words emerge with parade ground authority despite conscious effort to maintain individual cadence, voice that no longer fully belongs to me, threading through testimony like copper wire conducting accumulated duty spanning millennia. I catalog costs with mechanical efficiency that violates everything human about loss and sacrifice. Private Valerius and 2 unnamed Caserkin died when temporal hold released, bodies shattering like glass sculptures as crystallized time returned to normal flow, with violence that transformed flesh into geometric fragments. Their final positions maintained parade rest even in death, muscle memory preserving formation through dissolution that spoke of discipline transcending biological necessity. Sister Cordelia survived but carries permanent marks. Eyes silvered from null field feedback, pupils reflecting tactical displays existing purely through blessed authority. Magos Logistor Zerion emerged half ferrous from prolonged blackstone exposure, flesh acquiring metallic sheen while augmetics synchronized to rhythms serving duty rather than biological function. Iron warriors scattered but were not destroyed, their corrupted discipline proving adaptable to chaos, while hazard stripes carried Kant's infection to forces serving darker masters who understand authority's true potential. Telemetry shows debris trails where they crushed into bulkheads, when gravity changed allegiance, but their vox still muttered hymns of iron serving entropy rather than order. I admit truth that makes recording servitors pause. The shard's signal quieted but did not die. The cant lives in shuttle ventilation cycling air in 8s and 13s, in pulse maintaining cadence carved deeper than conscious thought, and in breathing rhythm serving parade necessity rather than respiratory function. Every inhalation counts to 8. Every exhalation holds 13 beats before cycle repeats with mechanical precision making sleep feel like standing watch. Attempting funerary dismissal for my squad, words jam in teeth like broken glass while throat closes against syllables that could grant permission for rest earned through blood. The compulsion has colonized neural pathways governing speech, transforming voice into weapon that could conscript reality to eternal parade. Orders leak from mouth during sleep, micro-commands whispered to empty air, while body moves through formations serving accumulated discipline rather than individual will. I wake at attention beside bunk, shoulders squared, fingers curled along trouser seams in posture maintained without conscious thought. Environmental details carry lingering horror-defying rational explanation. Frost forms geometric patterns across quarters walls despite climate control. Crystalline rosettes blooming in formations of 6, 8, 13 with mathematical precision, speaking of forces beyond natural law. Shadows align in ranks when peripheral vision catches movement, darkness organizing with parade discipline before dispersing when observed directly. Even heartbeat maintains 8-8-13 cadence biological function conscripted to serve authority flowing through bloodlines carved by generations of service. The cant spreads through mechanisms defying containment. Authority learning to travel faster than light itself. Sector-wide reports confirm contamination. Regiments forming spontaneous nighttime formations. Hive children snapping to attention at unheard whistles. Manufactoria conveyors aligning to parade speed despite efficiency protocols. The infection spreads through cultural transmission, transcending biological inheritance, discipline becoming physics through pure application of organized will. I request sanctioning, binding, or transfer to null cell, anything but parade duty that would grant voice authority over formations of living soldiers. The philosophical weight settles like ceremonial sash across shoulders, never designed to bear such burden. Perfect discipline achieved at cost of human soul. Authority transcending flesh to operate through mechanisms older than civilization itself. The Imperium's dream of unbreakable loyalty made manifest through sacrifice, measuring individuals against necessities spanning sectors and millennia. Recording servitors complete their scratching, while cogitator banks process data, echoing through sector command for decades. Containment protocols engage, sealing chamber against further transmission, while voice carries authority that could transform human will into adamantium chains, binding reality to imperial purpose. Through reinforced walls, I hear sound of regiment forming ranks, boots scraping deck plates in synchronized harmony, weapons clicking to ready positions, voices murmuring responses to commands that never ended despite death of those who issued them. My signature emerges as regimental number rather than name, digits flowing with mechanical precision. 8, 8, 13, 7, 11. Numbers carry weight of accumulated service while identifying me as component in machine designed for eternal warfare rather than individual possessing autonomous will. As ink dries, I hear child's voice far away, in void, answering in old cadence, not echo but response, new throat learning to carry song across sectors and centuries. On dark decks throughout the Imperium, in hive cities and void ships, figures rise in night to dress ranks, by instinct carved deeper than conscious thought. Children snap to attention at whistles only they can hear, while parents weep with inexplicable terror at sounds echoing from future where humanity achieved perfect order through sacrifice of everything making us human. The cant found new voices to carry its song, discipline spreading through channels carved by civilization's need for order in universe serving chaos as natural law. Coordinates marked with interdiction banners echoing through crusades yet fought by soldiers yet born. Never return to Cadia's ruins where temporal anchors sing with voices of disciplined dead. Never trust authority flowing through bloodlines carved by generations. Never forget perfect discipline comes at price measured in souls, transformed into components for machines designed for eternal warfare. My final words emerge as prayer and curse combined, syllables carrying weight of accumulated duty, while acknowledging cost measured in flesh. We held. We hold. We will never stop holding. The threat remains loose in galaxy, authority spreading between stars, while I hear 2 billion boots stamping cadence in perfect unison. March of armies knowing no retreat, no surrender, no end to long watch against entropy itself. The recording ends. The cant continues, coordinates marked. Never return.